So I've just typed in the chat, and you can feel free to type in the chat if you don't want to talk. I'll just give another 2 minutes for introductions. So setting my 2-minute timer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Groff, and I'm just outside Philadelphia.
Okay, welcome, Jen. And welcome, Linda. Anybody else? I see Laura. So welcome. We don't have polling capabilities. So what you can do is just on a scale of 1 to 10, just put a number in the chat where 10 is I feel like an expert, 1 is I feel clueless when it comes to editing with Plone. So if you feel really comfortable with content management with Plone and stuff like that, you can put a 10, in which case you'll help me in this presentation. And if you're maybe feeling a little less comfortable, you can give me just a gauge with if you're somewhere between 1, I'm really new, and 10, I'm a super expert. So just put your number in the chat, and that will help me to kind of gauge the audience. Whoa, Matthias. So you're going to be helping us.
Well, no. I don't know about that. That might be an exaggeration.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But it will come out as we move forward, right? Okay, so we have an interesting range. I'm seeing from 2 to 8. So you guys know who to call on. There's Matthias and there's Lee. Did I say Lee or? I'll say Lee because that's what I see here, LA. Right, so we have a good idea of the ranges. So I'm going to bring up my presentation now. I am, just for safety, I'm going to have to connect a second computer, which I'm going to connect to my phone's data. So I'm going to do that shortly. The reason I'm doing that is if internet goes down, I have a little bit of redundancy because my phone is on a different connection than my main internet, but the quality may not be as good. So just making sure you're aware of that. Okay, so let me share my screen and share my presentation. Okay, I think I shared the wrong screen. No, I'm pretty sure I shared the right screen. Are you seeing my screen now? Okay, great. I see a thumbs up there. Okay, so what are you,
No,
you should be,
it's not.
hello?
Not seen.
Not seeing the screen. Oh, I saw a
Not
thumbs
seen.
up. I thought
Not
that meant
seen
you're
it.
seeing the screen.
Sorry.
Just give me a second here. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing it. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great.
Mhm.
All right, thanks, Matthias. So there's some very basic assumptions that I'm making for this presentation, for this workshop. I think everybody here passes the assumptions, just the fact that you can log into Zoom. So, but it doesn't hurt to make sure that we're using the same vocabulary. So maybe you have different words for these things. So let's just make sure. So here's a quick review of tools we use on the web. Your browser typically has an address bar. You put addresses in there, and addresses are sometimes referred to as URLs. And the content of the site shows up inside of the browser. This is very basic, but that's pretty much the anatomy as we experience websites. So for today, what we want to do is just get a little background of Plone, demo the first steps, go through some of the principles and concepts of content management. We're going to look at user and group management, managing users, groups, and permissions. And then we're going to talk about some tips and tricks. Okay. I'm trying to do this presentation in about chunks of 1 hour. So I'm going to set my timer again, and I'm actually setting it for 55 minutes so that I have a kind of 5-minute warning. I'm capable of going way past the time, so I need these timers to keep me on track. Okay. So I'll give you a little background of Plone, although based on the responses, I think most of us know that Plone is an enterprise content management system. It allows non-technical people to create and maintain information, and that can be for websites or intranets. I apologize, I changed the layout of the slides at the last minute, and I see that I got caught with a little gremlin there. So typically the experience of using Plone involves getting content into Plone, and content could be text, like what we have here, and it's most commonly referred to as a page. When you bring in text in its basic form into Plone, you usually add it to what is called a page. I'm going to use the word page most of the times, but in Plone, you'll also see it referred to as a document, and that can cause some confusion. So I prefer the term pages. So typically, you'll take some text and you'll put it into Plone. You might also have some images, and you can take those images and put them into Plone. Okay, so this is This is illustrative of the idea. So any content that you have, you can get it into Plone as a page, as a picture. And there are other ways of getting it in, which we'll talk about. Plone basically at its first level is a storage system. It stores your pages, photos and images, documents, which in Plone they're referred to as files. And just to reduce confusion, I will talk about documents as files. And news and events, videos and audio files. So the whole idea is you can have different types of information which you're able to add to your Plone site. And all of this information together referred to as content, which is why we use the phrase content management. And I'm going through this just to make sure we're on the same page. And we'll probably spend another 2 minutes just making sure we're comfortable with that. Right. One of the overarching principles with Plone is the ability to group your content. And there are different ways of grouping it, but the most basic way of organizing your content is into folders. So Plone allows you to take your content and then place that content into folders. And based on the purpose of the content or the category of the content, you may have different folders for different content, but you also may have different folders because it's for example, a different department within a university, just as an example. So Plone is able to take your content and then individually render a piece of content. So for example, if you have a page, you could display a single page with Plone, and this is representative of an example of a single page with Plone. Or you may be displaying a listing page. The difference between the page on the left and the page on the right has to do with with what is being presented. This is a single piece of content, whereas this view here has several bits of content displayed as a listing. So if you're comparing it to your computer, this would be the file browser showing all the things that are available, whereas over here might be an individual file. Notice that we tend to have a title and a summary for individual bits of content. That same title and summary shows up in the listing. So you're really encouraged to have a description, which becomes your summary. If you do not have a description, then your listings will look empty because it will only have the title. At Altaru, which is the Plone service provider that I run, we prefer Plone because of its flexibility and rich feature set. One of the things that I've found is we don't always do Plone projects, but there are some projects, because of a need for complex permissions and workflow and organizing content into hierarchies, Plone really is really useful in those cases. For some sites, you only need something simple, just a publish and private state, and maybe you don't need hierarchy. Everything is a flat structure with everything on the same level. then that's not as important. You can get away without using something like Plone. We've actually been building Plone sites for just about 20 years. And some of our customers have been with us for more than a decade, some 15 years and so. And the same Plone site, and we upgrade it and we update the look and they keep going. So some of these sites, this example here is actually a site that was retired because the organization decided to standardize on a different content management system. And that's the only reason. They were fine with their site actually. And this was a customer that we worked with for 10 years or more. So just understand that Plone is great for the long haul, and it works with you and you can really build on it. Finally, just a little bit of information. Again, some of you may be aware of this, but these are probably the top 3 websites that you want to become familiar with if you're learning Plone. There's one other, community.plone.org, which is great if you want to ask questions and interact with people in the Plone community. Okay, I am going to just ask if there are any questions at this point. This would be a good time for you to ask questions, and I will ask a couple questions as well, because I'm curious the types of problems that you may have at the moment that you're trying to solve with Plone. But before that, does anybody have any questions? I'll make a note of them if it's too much to answer at once and get back to it. All right.
Good so far. Good.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's good so far. It's really good. Okay.
So no questions yet. Please write your questions in the chat. Each time I take a little break, I will peek at the chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat so that we can address them. So I have a question, and I'll type it in the chat. What problems are you trying to solve with Plone now? So all of you here are here because you have to interact with a Plone site. I think that's a reasonable assumption. If not, just tell me now so I'm aware. And for some of you, you already know the types of problems that you're going to need to solve in terms of what do I need to present? How do I need to present this information? What type of information? Please feel free to, again, type in the chat, or you can unmute and just share with us the problems that you are currently finding that you have to address. Okay, welcome. Biortiz, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right or if that's a shortening. Brenda, okay. Welcome, Brenda Yortiz. She says she has a new site, and adding content has been difficult, and she hopes to gain new skills to learn best practices, which is great. I hope that this is useful to you, Brenda. And Matthias, I'm looking to use the latest version of Plone 5.2 up for a faculty portal at my new university in Abuja. Okay, great. So that's important. All right. So Plone, it's interesting. I'm always discovering places where Plone is being used. So a lot of people didn't know that Plone is used in Jamaica, and Matthias is letting us know that it's being used in Nigeria, and of course we know it's used in the States and other places as well. Okay, any more comments about things that you've been trying to do with Plone and or you hope to do with Plone? If not, we'll move on to the next section. So just give a little bit more time. Okay, so let's get to the demo and first steps with Plone. After this section, just remind me, I need to have my laptop ready in case we have a power cut. And so unfortunately, we have to be careful about that and in case there's internet issues. Okay. So we're going to go to demo.plone.de. Let's see if this screen share will continue to work. I'm not sure if it will. Can you just let me know if you're seeing my screen? It should be at the Plone demos page now. Okay, great. Thank you, Brenda. So this is a close to default Plone site. What they've done for the Plone demo sites is they've added content, they've added multilingual capabilities. So the demo site is actually a better showcase of what Plone is capable of than the default Plone once you've just installed it. So for that reason, I like using the demo site rather than the a brand new installation of Plone. Also, it makes it easy because I can just send you here and everybody can go here and browse. Especially for virtual training, that's great. This demo site is actually running Plone 6. I would prefer to use Plone 5.2, but if we can't get a copy of Plone 5.2, I'll settle for Plone 6. I think what we need to do is just say, I think there's a way to change the URL. Plone 5.2 demo. See if we can do that really quickly. Right, so we'll continue using Plone 6. Just bear in mind that Plone 6 is still in beta, but it's the closest to the stable one, Plone 5.2. So, all right, so let me jump back to my presentation. So what I want you to do is head to the demo folder. So there's a special folder called demo. And underneath the demo folder, you're going to see that there is a page called a page. And we're going to click on it. One of the principles of Plone is that it supports this idea of listings as well as individual pages or individual content. What we're looking at here is a page, but there's a little bit more to it. So just to make sure that you're clear on what's happening, I'm just going to annotate this a little bit. My annotation software is taking a little while to load. Great. So what exactly are we looking at in front of us here? Well, the actual content is in this area here. On the left is Plone's navigation, and on the right is a portlet. And sometimes you can have multiple portlets. So this whole area here allows you to have multiple portlets, and think of those as shared things that can show up next to your content. I'm presenting by a window, so if you hear vehicles driving past, it's a compromise between getting good daylight and getting vehicles making noise. Joys of working from home. And on the other side, these are also portlets. Sometimes you'll find portlets in the footer as well, but the actual content is right here. So this is the actual content. This sidebar area here is sometimes called the left portlet because it holds the left portlets. This one here is called the right portlets. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that idea. Please, if you're having any concerns, just put them in the chat. I'll keep my eye on the chat. Sometimes it might take me a minute or two to notice it. I noticed that, for example, Matthias had mentioned that he's actually looking to integrate Plone with a learning management system. And that sounds interesting. That's not what we're going to look at today, though. But nonetheless, it sounds interesting. Right. Okay, back to the presentation. So a couple questions. For those of you who may be following along and maybe you actually went to the site, I'll help you cheat a little bit by pasting it in the chat. Question. What's the URL in the address bar of your browser when you go to the demo and app page? I really want you to pay attention to these things because Plone does something special with the URLs. They tend to reflect the titles of your folders and your pages. So even if you look in the chat, the message I just sent, somebody who's a power user can deduce a lot about the site by just reading the URLs. So in this case, the URL, the pattern that we see is the name of the site. And in this case, it's the English version. And then it's in a folder called demo. And it's a page called a page. Okay. Secondly, just for the sake of it, let's browse around a little more to see if we can observe that pattern throughout the site. So if I go to a news item and I look at the URL, it's going to say a news item. Similarly, perhaps I'm interested in a special folder and a page inside of that folder. Again, the titles tend to reflect and the URLs tend to reflect where you are. That's really useful for somebody who needs to kind of get a feel for where they are in a site. And so these URLs are great for power users. Okay. All right, so let's look at the next exercise. So as you navigate around, by now you should be able to see the structure on each page, and you'll notice that they tend to have a title and a description and some text, the main text. Okay. That's very common. So if you go around a Plone site, you should see this kind of approach. Now, if your site has a theme applied to it, sometimes that can affect the way it's presented, or sometimes certain aspects of Plone are hidden by the theme that you're using. But this is roughly how content is displayed. And as I said before, URLs in Plone reflect the way that content is organized. So for this exercise, I would like you to guess a little bit about the content by reading the URL. So can we have a volunteer who doesn't mind speaking and just saying what they think about the content based on the URL? Okay. Everybody's shy or finding a hard time finding the unmute button? Okay. I'm not seeing the chat because my screen is full screen. So let me see if I can get back to the chat. So in case someone's sending me a message. No messages. All right, well, let's discuss what we're looking at here. So we already kind of looked at the first URL. The second URL says to me that the type of content is probably news, just based on its name. This is news from 2017, and this is the title of the news item. So it's encouraging people to submit talks for the 2017 conference. This one here tells me that this is FBI.gov, which, by the way, the FBI does use Plone. They have an area for services, and one of their services, or one category of services, laboratory services. And in this case, the service is biometric analysis. So if my theory is correct, then I should be able to click that link, and it should take me to the FBI website. And what should load up is something to do with biometric analysis. And indeed, that is what we're seeing here. Great. So this idea of reading the URLs is very helpful a lot of the times with Plone. Okay. All right, so let's make some distinction between how content types are displayed versus how content types are listed. So in this exercise, we're looking at the idea of standalone pages, images, and listings. These are very different concepts in Plone, and kind of understanding this can sometimes help you with your content management. So we're going to go back to the demo Plone site, and let's see what we can discover. So we're back at the demo Plone site. Here's a news item. For this news item, it has the title, it has a description or summary, and then it has the entire news item. If we go to the demo folder, the demo folder has a summary view or a listing view, and the same news item shows up here, and here is the description. And if we click through here, it takes us to the full news item. So one of the concepts I mentioned earlier is this idea that listings in Plone are a way of kind of giving you a summary of different bits of content. And so I think of this as a listing page, and I distinguish it from pages or content, individual bits of content. So hopefully you would have noticed that even for the news item, you could find news item in the listing view, but you can also find that same news item by going directly to it. So it's found in different places. The image, if we go to demo and just take a peek at the image file, you notice that there's a preview of the image in the sidebar. But in addition to that, there is the actual image itself. In this case, this image has a title but no description. So as a result, in terms of the structure we're used to, there's the main content, the main body. There's a title but no description. Later on, what we can do is we can try and add a title and see what happens. So I'll just write that down as an experiment that some of you can try. What happens if we add a description, or if you prefer the word summary, to an image? So that's an experiment that we can try out. And another thing to point out here, most of this is managed by Plone. So you don't have to, worry about placing an image in the navigation. The navigation will preview the image automatically. Okay. Presentation is loading, so give me a second. All right. So for this exercise, I'm going to ask you to log in and log out. And we're going to use, if you may already have a Plone website, and what you'll discover is if you put /login at the end of the URL for your website, an unmodified Plone site would provide you with a screen where you can type your login name and password. If you don't have a Plone site to work with at the moment, you can use the demo one that we're using. I'll just send the link again. But what I want you to do is just experience the login experience. Now, if you're using the demo, you'll see that there are some ready-made logins, and also they have a shortcut, which you may not see in every Plone site because maybe your theme is different. And what they've done is they've given you the ability to log in as different types of users. So for now, if you're using this site, you can log in as a manager and click login. All right, so let's do that the way that I suggested, which is type in /login. And normally you type your login and password, but they've made it a little easier for you, and log in. Okay, once you're logged in, what you're going to see is a sidebar show up. Okay, now this is unmodified, unthemed site, but I would say for 70% of the time, the sidebar will look like this. Some people place their sidebar at the top, and if your manager has done that, you'll see instead of a sidebar, you'll see a top bar. Just so that you're aware of that, that is something in site setup where you can move the sidebar. And definitely that was so in older versions of Plone. Let me just double check if that's still the case for Plone 6. Or if they've removed that site toolbar position, you can set it to the top. Great. So if you prefer to have your toolbar at the top, you can do that. Still does the same thing, but now all your tools are above your site rather than running along the left of your site. But that's not the default. The default behavior in Plone is for the toolbar to be at the side, and specifically the side left. So let's just click save to get that back. Okay, so I'm assuming my working assumption is that you're working along and you've tried to log in. But send me a message if you have any questions about logging in. This is a good time to ask those questions. Okay. Now, to log out of a Plone site, you can navigate to your profile, your little profile icon, and click log out, or you can just add /logout to the end of your website URL. So there's more than one way to do it. So just as an example, let's go to the demo site. And if I want to log out, I can go log out /logout. And that will log me out. Or I can be logged in and use the option at the bottom here. Either way works. Most importantly, you just want to make sure that you're clear on this idea of being able to log out, whether you prefer to put /logout or otherwise. Okay, any questions? Remember, you can put your questions in the chat. If not, then I'll move to the next item. Okay, so here are a couple of experiments that you can try out. What if you're already logged in? What do you think would happen if you went to the /login address again? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Maybe type in the chat. What do you think would happen if you're already logged in and then you try to visit /login? No thoughts? Okay, so Linda says it's going to boot you out. I believe it takes you back. Brenda says it takes you back. I'm not clear on what you mean by takes you back in this context, Brenda. Oh, back to login. All right, well, let's see. So we're going to test this out. So I'm going to put /login. And I guess this is partially checking if you're paying attention because we did this already. Let me just confirm. I'm actually logged in now. So let's just confirm that I'm already logged in. Oh, I'm not logged in. So not good example. So let me log in first. And let's log in using the by appending. Okay. So I'm going to log in by appending, and I'm going to log in as manager since that's what we've been doing. And how do we know we're logged in? We see this little sidebar here. Let's pretend that I visited somewhere else on the site. So I'm going to head to demo. So we're fully logged in, no question about it. And then I'm going to go to /login. And indeed, what's interesting here is it does provide me with a login page. But in addition to that, the sidebar is still visible because I'm already logged in. So that, I would say that's a little quirk in Plone, but it makes the point that it faithfully takes you to the login page. All right. All right, what happens when you put the wrong credentials? It's good to be familiar with what it looks like when you've put in the wrong credentials. So let's log out and log in with the wrong information just to see what does Plone do if I try to log in with the wrong information. So I'm going to go to /login. I'm going to put a password that is definitely wrong. And the result is a screen that says the login has failed. Okay. And then if I actually put in the correct information, it should let me in. All right. So a quick question. Usually at this point, we'd have sweeties to give out or something like that, or candy. I suppose depending on where in the world you call it sweeties or candy. But I'll give you a virtual high five or something. Can you state 2 ways of logging out? So there are at least 2 ways of logging out. Feel free to unmute. I don't mind hearing people respond.
Well,
2 ways of logging out.
well, you type, can I answer that?
Sure, go ahead.
I think the first way you showed was using the URL, right? Just type in logout at the end of the URL for the site.
Right, so that's
Like
URL
logout.
based. So I'll type that in the chat. Yeah.
And the other one would be using your profile. Yeah, the profile link in the control panel, I think. That's
Right. So the other way is so one way is to append the URL, but the other way is to just go to your profile link, as you said, Matthias, and just click log out. Yes. So you get the virtual high five. Although I feel like you knew this long ago. All right, so let's move on. We're going to, so by now everybody should be really confident about logging in and logging out. They should understand a couple quirks about Plone's login and logout system. So we're going to move on. Unless there is pressing question. All right, so I'm not hearing any pressing questions or seeing any pressing questions. All right, so now we're going to look at preferences. Okay, excuse me a second. Just need to change the setting on my phone. Okay. Right, preferences. So within Plone, underneath your navigation, underneath your profile menu, one of the options is preferences. And if you go into that section, you see that you can change certain settings about your users, or about yourself. So for example, this person's name is Jane Doe, and their email address is janedoe@example.com. If they prefer to use a different email address for password recovery and things like that, they could change that. You can also change your password, and there are a couple other preferences that you can change. And that is found under preferences. Okay, let's just look at that quickly. How would you go about managing preferences? So let's actually do a quick demo of that. All right, so we're at the site, and we're going to go to preferences. Right. Oh, I see a question that Matthias was asking. Will we get to cover theming in Plone? Unfortunately, this course does not cover theming. If time allows, maybe I can show you a little bit about theming.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah, that would be awesome, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I watched one of your theming videos on YouTube, and it was just great, you know.
Yes. That was fun. It's not as, I mean, it's a little trickier than I made it seem. That was for a demo, but we'll see if time allows. We'll see if we can do a little bit of theming. So let's see if we can get to that. So here we are under preferences, and as you can see, you can change your things like your editor. By default, we use TinyMCE. If you have other editors installed, like if you prefer a different editor and you've installed it as an add-on, your site administrator has installed it, you'll see it as an option here. And each user can choose their preferred editor. You can also specify your preferred language and your time zone. Of course, you'll only see time zones that are available for your site, so they're not going to show you every time zone. You can change your password. This is a demo site. I think I should not change the password. So, but on your own site, you would be able to change your own password. Okay, great. So at this point, we are about 12 minutes from the scheduled break, and I've actually reached the next section, which is going into content management. So if you guys want to take a 5-minute stretch, we're ahead of time, which is good. So maybe that will give us a little time at the end to go through things that may be out of the scope of the course, but you might want to get into. We'll see if we can do that. Okay. So I'm going to set my timer for a 5-minute break. All right. You'll hear the timer go off if you're nearby, because I'm going to remain unmuted. Okay. So let's set a timer again. Get into the next section. Hopefully everybody took advantage of the break. Let me mute my laptop. I took the time to have my laptop set up in case there are any issues. So I'll quickly switch machines if we have any issues. Okay. When it comes to Plone, this is a very simplified representation of what I call the content lifecycle. And it starts with the creation of content and it ends with the deletion of content. Of course, a more sophisticated lifecycle would allow content to be in more than just published state. So Plone has the capability to have things in a state called pending. And depending on how you're working with your content, you could archive content. And some sophisticated workflows allow you to do things like have things in the states associated with the items. So for example, a lab management system where you're tracking samples, there may be several states that are related to the stages of the samples. So then the samples might enter as submitted for or registered, and then the samples may be tested, then the samples may be approved, and then the samples may be released. And all of those stages would be a type of content lifecycle. And Plone is perfectly capable of doing workflows like that. But in the simplest form, you have create, edit, publish, and private, which I don't have here, and then the ability to delete content. And when I think of content management, a comprehensive picture includes the management of users. So it's not just the ability to manage content. That's a simplified way of looking at content management. But the users, what type of permission do those users have in relation to the content? Can they access it and so on? And then what information do you have about the content, which is not necessarily the content itself, but information about the content. So from the perspective of Plone, things are arranged by folders. Information about the content would be things like what type of content is it? Is it a news item? Is it a page? All of those things are information about the content. And then you're also able to manage things like when. So when is this content, when was this content published, or when is it scheduled to be published? And finally, as I hinted before, the users are about who can do what, you know, who can view, who can edit, and things like that. So these are key ideas of content management. And in that sense, Plone is a very robust content manager. And there are trade-offs. There are some content managers that might be easier to work with, but far less comprehensive. And in a sense, they may let you down at certain points where you need to be able to do fancier things. So here's a key concept that you need to be familiar with. And we've kind of hinted at the idea of content types. That's about what type of information. If you want to think of it as kinds of information, Plone is able to know and sort information by the kind of information. If you're logged in, the default available content types will look something like this. And I need to point out a couple things here. So let's point them out. I have not spoken about collections yet. Collections are a special type of content, and we'll get to those. So from my perspective, the basic content types are events, files, images. And when we say files, what are we talking about? We're talking about PowerPoint presentations, Microsoft Word documents, Excel documents, PDFs, common files that you'd share. Even MP3 files and video files are all considered to be files in terms of the basic usage of Plone. Images are special files in they're still files, but you're able to view them. And so JPGs, PNGs, and I don't think you can add SVGs as images in this context, but the basic bitmaps like GIFs, JPEGs, and PNGs, or if you prefer PNGs, GIFs, and yeah. The link content type is literally for you if you needed to have a catalog of important links. This would be a great thing to use. So let's say you wanted to start a site that was about gardening and you wanted the top gardening links around the internet, you would add them as links. And then in a listing view, you'd be able to see all those links of the top gardening sites. So that's the purpose of the link content type. The news item allows you to post news. It is commonly used for announcements. Some people use news items in the same way that they use blog posts. Yeah. And then finally, there is the page. And the page is probably considered the simplest type of content. It's usually text. You can use rich text. You can add images to this rich text. And most generic-ish content will be added as a page. Okay, so that's a tour of the different content types. Let's see if we can talk about the ones that I consider a little more special. So you'll notice that I did not mention collections and I didn't mention folders. I didn't consider them basic content types. And only because I think these are a little more special, because a folder allows you to act as a container for other content types. A folder can also be a way of managing your listings. So you can create a folder called 2017, which contains all news for 2017. In that 2017 folder, you would have all news items for 2017, and then you could view that folder. You could view it as a listing. So in that sense, it's kind of special. A collection is a special query. That's the best way I explain a collection. It's a special query in the sense that what you're really saying is, let me query for a particular set of criteria. So that could be, I want all news items that were published this week. you could create a collection with that predetermined query. And then when someone visits that collection, it would show you all news items that were published this week. You could have more sophisticated queries. You could query for a particular word in any content, in which case it would do a query across different content types. And you can query based on tags. So you could find all content that has a particular subject that's tagged with that subject. So content collections are a good way of curation throughout the website. So if there's something that you want to present to people and people are adding new content regularly that might be relevant to that collection, the collection will automatically update when someone adds something that matches that query. So it's really useful in that sense. So a collection is a smart query, and it's an aggregator. You know, just different names for the same thing. All right, so we're going to do an exercise called Spot the Content Type. And just reminding you of the different types of content. We have news items, pages, events, files, folders, and collections. These are the default content types. Now, on many Plone sites, people create additional content types. And we can talk about that a little later. There is a tool that allows you to define new content types. So for example, if you were having a gardening site again, perhaps you might have a content type called gardening tools. And when you want to add a new gardening tool, you could go to your site and say, add new gardening tool. And it would have different fields for that gardening tool. But these are the default types. And again, from my perspective, a collection is a special type because it's not really about presenting its own self. A collection focuses on presenting what it has found based on a special query. All right, so I have a couple URLs for you. This is a very basic unthemed website, but it's a very good case study of Plone being used for sharing content. So try to visit that website. I'll visit it for you as well. And let's see if we can make out what's going on. All right. So if you were to make a guess, what type of content type are we looking at here? Any thoughts? So we're looking at a Plone site, and we're looking at a particular URL, which is calendar/2016. Okay, I'll go and highlight that for you at the top. So you should see.
Type?
Pardon me?
Event type?
All right, so I'm hearing events type. Was that Linda? Well, Linda put it in the chat. All right, so we definitely have votes for events. Good. Any other thought? All right, so this website actually, this is just a simple page. This is a page with a table. and then the table is filled in manually. So maybe that was a trick question, but this is just a page. Okay. So it gives you an idea of what you could do if you wanted to put some information up quickly. All right, let's look at another page. So this one, there's some interesting hints there. So this one, what do you think, what type of content is this? All right, Linda says event. Is Linda going to say event for all of them? Actually, this one is an event. So high five for Linda. This one is indeed an event. There's some clues there. Event content types in Plone have additional fields which allow you to include contact numbers and so on. Right. So the URL here is a little bit of a help. These events are stored in a folder called events. Now your events don't have to be in a folder, but by placing them in a folder, it gives you a little more structure. So in this case, there's a folder called events, and you can also see in the breadcrumbs here. I don't know if you can see my mouse going up and down over these breadcrumbs. That indeed there is a folder called events. And then inside of that folder, we have an event called secondary and tertiary swimming championships. As you can see, it has additional information. So where is this event going to be held? It's going to be held at the National Aquatic Center. This was 2 years ago, January 2018, and it even includes a time zone, just in case you're not sure. So you know that this is happening in the Jamaica time zone. Okay, next one. And my desktop is slowing down. I don't know if I have too many things open. So that might be a good reason to switch to the laptop. Let me see if I can switch to the laptop quickly. Okay. All right, you're going to have to give me about a minute to do this switch. Because I'm just getting the spinning beach ball of death on my desktop right now. All right, so we're talking about content management. We're looking at a few URLs. We had looked at events. And we were in the middle of playing spot the content type. All right, so I'm going to try and stop sharing from my desktop. If it will allow me to stop sharing. Okay. Okay. All right, so I will continue sharing from my laptop because my desktop is getting a little bit slow. Can everybody see my screen still? Okay, great. All right, so where were we? We were looking at this next one is interesting. So what do you think is going on here? If you had to hazard a guess, what is this URL? I can paste it in the chat. All right, Linda says an image. Let me scroll down a little more. Maybe that will help. Do you still think it's an image? All right, next guess, a page. Brenda says information about the item. Matthias says an event. No. All right. So this one is a little tricky. One of the capabilities that Plone has is the ability to have a folder with a default item. So in this case, this is a page which is sitting down as the default item of the water polo folder. So for this website, what we've done is we've organized it into different categories. So there is swimming, there is diving, and there is artistic. And then for each one of them, we have pictures. But these pictures are embedded in pages. So I don't know if that counts as a trick question, but yeah. So the key concept here that I'd want to highlight, and I'll just type it in the chat. Where's my chat? Right, I'll type it in the chat. Folders can have default items. And when you set a default item, what happens when you go to that folder is the item that has been set as the default becomes the view on that folder. So that's a little tricky, but it's a really useful thing to know about, because if you have your site organized by folders, you may have the folder full of news items, but maybe you don't want people to see a listing of news items. Maybe you want page that welcomes them to this section. That's up to you. You can place a page there as your default item. And when people go to that folder, they'll see the default item. So folder default items are a useful concept to be aware of. All right, so let's continue. All right. What do you think this is? So number 4. All right, I'll click the link. I think when I click the link, it might be a giveaway. Any thoughts? Let's follow that and see what we see. Oh, my screen is too big now. See if I can make my screen a little smaller. Might be too small now. Does that help, Brenda? I've made my screen a little bit smaller. I've changed, no change really. Okay. Oh, are you on a phone, Brenda? Just wondering. No. Oh wow. Let's see. Let's see if I can change the way that I'm sharing. Perhaps if I share my entire desktop instead. Oh. So the problem might be the resolution on the laptop. So you're still having issues seeing the screen. Anybody else having issues seeing the screen? Let me see if I can manage with the desktop. I can switch back, if anything. See if it will cooperate. Hopefully it was just a temporary thing. Okay, so we're back on the desktop. Seems to be behaving now. So hopefully that will be better for those who may have been having issues. So yeah, this content type here is a file. And depending on how your Plone site is configured, when you click a file, sometimes it shows you a default view before it actually shows you the file. So as you can see here, when I went to the file initially, it actually showed me a kind of page with a link to the file. It gave me a little bit of information about the size of the file and the name of the file. And then by clicking on it, I was able to view that file. Okay. So we've seen a couple different types of content. I think that's it. Oh, one more. Let's go to this one and see. All right, so this is results/2017. And here are a bunch of results. What would you say 2017 is? What kind of content type? No thoughts? Ah, yes, Linda, you're on a roll now. This is indeed a folder. Yes, congrats. You can get 2 high fives for that. This is a folder, and it allows us to place information from 2017 into that folder. And it's also paginated, so you see 20 items at a time, and you can go to the next set of items. All of this functionality is built into Plone, and you can do that. Okay. All right. Let's move on. So we're still talking about content types, and one of the characteristics of content types is every content type has its own special types of fields. So an event will have different fields from an image, because with an image, you're able to upload an image file, whereas with an event, you're able to say where the event is going to take place. You're able to say the time of the event, the start time and the end time. You don't need that for an image. And so as a result, you'll have different fields for different content types. And here's something interesting, and I don't see this in every content management system. You can, depending on the content type, display the same content type in different ways. And we can look at that. There's a special menu called Display associated with items, and we'll look at that. What this makes possible is for you to have a special way of showing stuff in one case that you may not want to use in another case. All right. So here's a very important concept. I've said it before, and I've put it here again, because this is different from, say, another content management system that you might be used to. And whereas there are some content management systems that do facilitate folders or maybe simulate hierarchy and folders, Plone is fully about a folder-based approach. Content can literally be arranged into folders the same way you would on your desktop or laptop. So the folder content type allows us to have folders in folders in folders and arrange things how we want. So that's a really important concept. Another concept that sometimes we overlook because we don't realize that we're doing it this way, at least people in the Plone community. Lots of the management, the content management is done in the context where the content is. Some content managers, they have an admin screen where you might go to add a new event or add a new, I don't know, image. With in-context management, if you wanted to add an image to the waterpolar folder, you would navigate to the waterpolar folder and then you would add the image. So this idea of doing things in context is important. You navigate to where you need to do your editing. So that's a really important concept. So 3 key concepts that we talked about in this section, content types, and the idea that content types, Plone knows that this is a file because it was added as a file. Plone knows that this is an image or an event. And also the content types have different fields because they are different. The folder-based approach is important to be aware of. The fact that things are arranged into folders, and Plone takes that to the next level. And then finally, in context management, the ability to edit things where they exist. So you'd navigate to the item and then do your editing. I would say 90% of the time, that's the way that you manage content in Plone. Okay. So all this talk about managing content, we should actually talk about adding content. Based on how people self-rated, many of you have at least added some content. So this will be somewhat of a review, but maybe there are gaps in your knowledge, and maybe as we go through this, we can kind of fill in some of those gaps. Okay. This is a good time to take a little confidence rating. In terms of adding new content to your Plone site, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning you're clueless and 10 meaning I'm fine with this. This is really simple. Can you just in the chat put your ranking? How would you rank yourself for adding new content to a Plone site? Okay, so I'm seeing 5s, 6s, 8s. I don't know if other people have tuned out. So right now, most people are relatively comfortable with adding new content. Nobody here is a 2 or a 3. All right, so all right, so this is definitely a bit of revision here. You can add news items, you can add pages. Again, I use the word pages. Plone, let me show you something really quickly that's important to be aware of, because it can be a little confusing. So let's head to our Plone site. Are we logged in? Yes, we are. Let us add a page. Good. Everybody sees very clearly that I'm adding a page. Good. So I'm going to click page, and we're adding a page, and it's loading it up. I'd like to point out something. If you're on an older version of Plone, that might confuse you. So most of us will not be using Plone 6. We're probably using Plone 5. And that might be the case for the next 2 years, depending on the policies of your organization or how easy it is for you to migrate and upgrade. If you're on an older version of Plone, when you select add a page, you will not see this. Instead, you will see it say something like this, something very confusing if you're paying attention. Now, you know for sure that you clicked add page, but for some reason, older versions of Plone have decided that you're adding a document. The reason for this is that in older versions of Plone, document was the term used in the code. And in fact, even on Plone 6, you will notice if you take a peek at the URL up here, I don't know if you can read that. I can cut and paste it into the chat. Even though you said add page, what you see come up, and I just added it to the chat, in the URL is add document, because inside of the code, a page is still called a document. However, in terms of what it really does, a page is probably an acceptable name, and it's the name that's used in the user interface now. So I'm just pointing that out. When speaking with people in the Plone community, the word document and page, they tend to be used interchangeably, especially people who have been using Plone for a long time don't even realize how confusing that might be for, you know, less experienced users. Okay. So I thought I'd just point that out while I remembered it, so that everybody would be on the same page, pun intended. All right. So here's a question that you might hear. Is it possible to cut and paste HTML from other pages? So can I copy some HTML or rich text and just paste it directly into my Plone site? And another question, how do I upload a document and link to it at the same time? So first of all, let me make it clear. When I use the word document, I'm talking about a file. I'm talking about a Word document or an Excel file or a PDF. So the question here, read in that way, is how do I upload a PDF file and link to it at the same time? I think these are common content management issues. So let's address them. Let's talk about the first one, cutting and pasting HTML. And we're going to use the website. So we're adding a page here, and we'll call this the demo page. Here's a question. I'm getting a question here. I'm noting the questions, so feel free to send me questions. Talking of folders and context, is it right to think of home folder as root of the folder tree? I'm going to make a note of that. As, in fact, let me just, I have a little piece of paper, but I need a little more paper to keep track of some of the important questions. So give me 30 seconds to grab a piece of paper. Even better. I now have my clipboard. So I'll make some notes on my clipboard. So that question, I'm just going to write it on the clipboard so that we can get back to this. And there goes my virtual background somehow. Okay. All right, so that question again, is it right to think of the home folder as root of the folder tree? I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to leave it on my clipboard and we can get back to it to explore that in a little more detail. All right, so let us start filling this document in. This is my cool document. It has a write-up about trees from Wikipedia. This looks more like the summary. So let's put this here. This will be my title, Trees from Wikipedia. And let's head to Wikipedia. Wikipedia and search for trees. See what we get. All right. I'll take the Wikipedia list of trees. Since I'm in the Caribbean, let's see what trees are in the Caribbean basin. If any of them are growing in my yard. And let's learn about Avicennia germinans. Right, which is mangrove. That's not growing in my yard. I'm not by the sea, so I'm near enough. So this is rich text. So it's rich text because it has hyperlinks, it has bold text, it has italic text, and it has images. I actually studied mangroves in university. And one of the things about mangroves is that they actually grow their seeds. Am I able to paste this? I'll just do Command V to paste. They actually grow their seeds inside of a kind of, what do you call it? The seeds actually start to grow on the tree itself. So the seeds, it's called vivipary, which is very interesting. But more interesting for this Plone presentation is that the rich text carries across faithfully. Let's look at the source code. If you look at the source code, and if you're familiar with HTML, you see that what it really has done is taken the rich text, which is stored as HTML, and just carried it across faithfully. And we'll just call this Black Mangroves. from Wikipedia. All right. So as you can see, you can actually move rich text across into Plone. And it works pretty well. Okay. Even the citation, which uses a super script, is carried across faithfully. And these links actually link back to Wikipedia, and they should work fine. Okay. Brenda said she wants to be where I am. Is that because it's warmer here now? Yeah. I'm not complaining. It's the weather is great right now. It can get super hot, but right now it's really nice. We're actually at the beginning of our tourist season, so we'll see how that works with COVID. Adding a page will always put the link in the toolbar above. Yes, that's actually a really good question. So if you add a page in the root of the site, as Matthias was pointing out, let's click contents here. Contents is a really great way to see the structure of your site. The page that we just added is actually at the root of our website. That's considered a bad practice. At least I consider it a bad practice. What I recommend instead is to take your page, I just cut it, and place it in a folder. If your page is placed in a folder, then you never have that issue. It will follow the folder structure, and you'll notice that it doesn't show up in the navigation bar. There is another way to do that. There's another fix for that, and some of you may be familiar with it. Maybe Matthias and some of you, anybody who gave themselves 6 and upwards. But I'll demonstrate that. So let us say you actually want that page to be at the top level, but you don't want that page to, what's the word? You don't want that page to show up in the navigation at the top. Okay. Well, in that case, not sure if I'm having some type of error here, but let's see. Oh, site just went down. Didn't plan for that. All right. So we're about to go to our next break. In the break, I'm going to have to just spin up our Plone site. So our break is supposed to be 5 minutes from now, and I set a timer. So given that if this site doesn't come back soon, I'm going to have to just spin up a site that we can work with. Okay, it's back. Okay. I don't know, maybe I should speak to the guys who set this up. Maybe it detects when you add a page. But I was about to point out that if you add a page, one of the options you can do is set the default settings. And under settings, you can say exclude from navigation. That's just a little trick if you definitely want it to be at the top level but not show up in the navigation. So now,
That should apply to folders too, right?
pardon me?
Would that apply for folders as well?
Yes, if you add a folder and you don't want it to show up here,
Right.
you can just go to settings and say exclude from navigation.
Great.
Great. So trees, something about trees. I don't know if it's still in my clipboard. Oh, yes, it is. Great. Great. So, wait, that's not supposed to be. Did I not tell it to be excluded from the navigation? Settings. Oh, I know what's going on. Because I'm at the trees page now, and this is another setting that I'm going to need to change. But if I'm anywhere else, it should not show. If it does continue to show, we've just found a bug in Plone 6. So as you see, it doesn't show in the normal navigation. If, however, I navigate to that page, it does show. There is a way to get around that as well. And we might as well just spend the next 2 minutes looking at that because that's important. So right now, a couple of things. One, this document, this page is private. And it's red because it's private. If you go there and you're not logged in, you will not be able to access this page. But if I do go to the page, it does show up in the navigation bar. There is a setting that can control that behavior. It's under the navigation, on the site setup navigation. And I don't remember which one of these it is, automatically generate tabs. So this setting will disable the whole automatic generation. Then there is generate tabs from items other than folders. So by default, Mateus, you are asking about folders. This one will only add tabs if it's not a folder. I don't know if, depending on the version of Plone you're using. But there's also, or there was an option, path to be used as root. Show items normally excluded from navigation if viewing their children. Now this has the side effect of if you're viewing an item, it will show up in the navigation. If you don't want that to ever happen, you're going to have to disable that particular functionality. So now that I've disabled that functionality, if I'm remembering correctly, what will happen is going to /trees, and I'm navigating to it, but I could have just typed it in the URL. It should not show up here. So you notice I'm at trees, but now it's not showing. So I'll just show you once more where that is in site setup. And I know it's there as far back as Plone 5.0 on the navigation. I can't speak for Plone 4, but show items normally excluded from navigation if viewing their children. If that is unchecked, then you don't have that side effect of something popping up into the nav bar when you don't want it to. Okay. So I'm going to click save, and we are now upon our next break. Let's just mark where we've reached. Right. So I was just about to get to this point here which we kind of got to anyway, which is it's really recommended that you organize things into folders because that solves the problem without having to do what I did a while ago. So that's a good point for us to take a break. So we're going to take another 5-minute break. Just quick poll. Does anybody need more than 5 minutes? That's a bad question.
Yeah,
10
would be nice.
All right, we'll do 10.
Good.
We'll do 10. All right.
Great.
All right, great. So 10-minute timer. I am on. Just waiting to see a hand or hear something or see something in the chat. Okay, great. So we know for sure at least 2 people are back. Right. So one of the features of Plone is this ability to automatically generate the navigation. But if you put everything at the top level of your site, you've experienced the situation of your navigation just starting to grow and grow and grow. And the solution to that is to organize your site into sections, which will be your folders. And then within those folders, you can add your content. And if you follow that practice, then your top level navigation will be steady. It won't start doing strange things. For some persons, they just use themes where the navigation is fixed. And so if you have a theme that doesn't change the navigation, then that also works. Although I don't like that approach because it means that a content manager can't control things that maybe it's okay for them to control. Okay, so let us talk about publishing content. Oops, I think I pressed 1 too many times. All right. Most content on your website is already supports publishing workflow. And for Plone, the default setting is a workflow that is private or public, meaning your content is either private or public. When it's in a private state, there is a red color to indicate that it's private. And when it is published, we tend to use blue. There's a couple more things I need to say about published and private, but let's head to the demo site and take a look at the content that we have there. Oh, and let me remember to set my timer so that we don't run over time. Okay, great. All right. Oh, I see someone. Well, if you're putting up baobabs, that's definitely a tree that's known from Africa. So I don't know if that was Matthias playing around with it. I don't know, but I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I didn't realize to show up.
What's
Yeah,
that?
sorry about that. I was just playing with my own locking on. I was just playing with my own locking in the demo side. I didn't realize it.
Okay.
Something was
Okay.
working on.
That's fine. That's fine.
I was testing a few features. I was looking at the navigation, how you could, whether you support multiple levels of navigation, you know, and the ability to hide content.
Your volume is
from
not so great,
navigation.
Matthias.
So basically, the demo only works for one manager.
It only works.
The volume is not so great. So what I thought that there would be different managers. Can you hear me?
You
Now I
might be better to type.
realize it's just one manager account.
It's so earlier in the call I was hearing you okay, but it's really going not hearing you at all. I don't know if there's yeah, it wasn't so bad earlier, but now it's not going too well. I see you wrote a question in the chat about Volto. So perhaps we can talk about Volto as well. So I'll make a note of that as something to address. But there's, when it starts to sound robotic, I'm getting that. So I'm thinking maybe there's a bandwidth issue. But you can still type in the chat, and maybe once it's sorted out, sometimes Zoom goes in and out. So maybe we try again a little later. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
But I assume that you are doing some experiments with the navigation based on what we were talking about. I don't know if there's some delay. I think I'll move my mic closer as well so people can hear me. Okay, well, let's move to the next thing. So we're about to look at publishing, and we could actually use what Matthias has added here. So again, we're going to do this in context. So I'm going to this folder, and the folder has a state of private at the moment. Because it's private, I cannot see it unless I'm logged in. If I want persons who are not logged in to see it, I'm going to have to publish it. And that's a matter of invoking a transition called publish, and that will cause it to go into a state called published. Now, as I mentioned before, this is the basic default setup of Plone. You can go really fancy, and you can have lots of states for the workflow that you use at your organization. So what's going to happen here, the content of this folder happens to be another folder that's private. So if we try to access this as somebody who's not logged in, and let's try that. I'm going to, let's see, if I open an incognito window, will you see it? No, I'm going to have to change my share before you see my incognito window. So let's do a new share and open my incognito window, which you should now see. And let's paste the URL. Now, if you compare what's going on here, you're going to notice that the incognito window does not show the folder. If I go back to the original one, okay. I think think that's what we want. Trying to share both of them at the same time. I think you're seeing both of them now. So if we go back to the original, this is what somebody who's logged in will see. But I cannot see that folder because in the incognito window, I'm not logged in. In fact, if I even know the URL of the other folder, which happens to be Bokis, and I go and type that in, because I'm anonymous and it's not published, it's going to give me a login screen. So from the perspective of the anonymous user, I'm not allowed, and it's going to prompt me to log in. So that's important. I'm going to just make a note of images. Images have a very special publishing story. Images do not, it's the best way to put this, images do not have workflow. So if I go to an image and I pay attention to the sidebar on the left, there is no state. Images don't have state. They're neither public nor private or whatever. So at this point, someone should say, well, then how do I hide an image from somebody? How can I prevent somebody from seeing an image if images don't have state? Let's see what's possible. I am going to copy using, this is a different way of copying. Maybe you've used it before. There's an actions menu. And because I'm looking at this image, remember we said about context, I can copy that image and the image is now copied. Let's go over to the Bokis folder on the Baobabs. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. I think I hear you properly now, Matthias. I'm not sure what was going on before.
It's probably my network.
Okay, yeah, definitely
Sorry.
hearing you. Yeah. The volume is still a little low, but I'm not getting the issue I was having before.
Okay, good.
All right, so now I'm going to paste. So the image is now in the Bokis folder, right? Remember we said images don't have state. So what happens if I try to access this image as an incognito user? So this is somebody who's not logged in. What is going to happen? It still won't let me look at it. But then you might say, oh, well, that's the view. What if I want to see the image itself? Like, I think you should be able to see the image if you just put the URL directly of the image. It shows you the image alone. So maybe I'm able to do that. I actually don't remember what Plone does in this case, so this is just checking. Let's see. Right, so if you know the URL directly of the image, you can still get that image, even if it's in a private folder.
Wow.
Okay.
So,
what's that?
That's a security concern.
Depends. So if you're absolutely concerned about your image private, let's say you want to make images private, you can enable state on images so that they follow workflow and they can be published and made private. In fact, I think that's something you can do really quickly. It's a tangent, but let's see if we can tangent quickly. There is a content types menu on the setup, or content types control panel on the setup. So if you head to site setup and then you go to, it used to be called dexterity content types. I'm trying to remember if that's what it's still called. Looks like building blocks right here. You can actually control the workflow, how the workflow behaves on different items. So you can, is it here? It might not be here. I think there's another menu called type, content settings. Yeah, it's actually the content settings menu.
I'm kind of very surprised at this behavior, you know.
This is concerning, right?
Yeah, because I understand Plone supports something called acquisitions, right? So
yes.
And a folder you can then override that in a subfolder. You can make a subfolder private. And my thought process was that from that level going down, everything
right.
in it, in the subfolders of that one made private would not be visible. But
right.
What I'm getting here is that we know the direct link of an image in a folder that's private, you can still access it from the web.
Yes. So the acquisition is not really kicking in there.
Right.
But you have to know the exact URL. Mm-hmm. But you can enable workflow. Notice that images by default have no workflow.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually tell all your images to use a workflow.
Okay.
Now, I am not telling you to do that.
So it's a performance issue. Right.
Pardon me?
It could be for performance reasons like then.
I missed the last part.
So might be the reason for that behavior is really to improve the performance.
Yes, that's correct. That's what I was about to say. The performance can be impacted if every time you're accessing an image, the whole Plone machinery has to spin up and check the permissions on that image.
Right.
So instead, we start with no workflow on images.
Right, get it.
Right. So that's a little tangent, but I wanted to point it out because two things. One, the images can actually become hidden because of the fact that they're located in a private folder. Mm-hmm. And two, if you actually want to control the workflow on images, you can by just assigning a workflow to them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a little tangent, but I think it's worth being aware of. Okay, so that's a little bit about images, a little bit about publishing. That publishing concept, actually, the contents view is a really nice way of dealing with publishing because you may want to do bulk operations, and this is where you do those bulk operations. So, so let's say you wanted to change permissions on the demo folder. There is an option here to change the state. I said permissions, but I really meant the state. And you can retract or send back. Let me just say, both of these effectively do the same thing. They make your content private. So somebody's going to ask me, why would we have two different ways of getting something to the private state? I will leave you to think about that for a little while. I will write it down on my clipboard. And maybe you'll tell me the answer when we're discussing it later. The other thing is, because demo is a folder, you can tell demo that you want everything in demo to become private. And what that will do is it will walk through the entire demo folder and make stuff private. This is what I'm doing now. If I click on demo and enter the demo folder, everything in the demo folder is now private. Okay. Except for files and images, which do not have any workflow. So it's not just images, other files as well. And it is for performance reasons. All right, so just in case we want to actually see these things, let's go back up the tree and let us change the state by publishing it, include contained items, and apply. So it's going to walk the entire demo folder, descend into it, and change everybody. Now, if I did not check this box, I could make the demo folder private while the content of the demo folder is public, or whatever state I'm changing it to. So this time I didn't check the box, which means all the content inside of demo is now untouched by the change that I made to demo. So this is a nice way to do bulk operations. And you can also do it this way as well. If you can check multiple things here and publish them. So it's a great way to make quick changes. In fact, I'll show you a little write-up about these changes. Let's see if I can find it quickly. If not, I will move on. So Plone didn't always have this capability, but it was something that I thought would be useful. So back in the day, I actually would write little blog posts about things that I'd love to be able to do in Plone. And one of them I had asked about was, how do you make changes, bulk changes? At the time, it wasn't a thing. Not seeing it here, this is not the post, but if you spend a little time searching, you'll probably find it. Okay. Right, are there any questions about publishing content? Okay. All right, great. All right. Wait, was that a yes, no from Linda? No, I think the yes was earlier. And the no just came now. All right. Okay, so these are some tips that I find really useful. And these are tips that some of them might be useful even outside of Plone. So one thing that I really find useful, if I'm taking text from, say, a Word document or from some other source, a lot of people will use Command V or Control V to paste, but sometimes it carries across formatting that you don't actually want. Maybe you just only want the text. If you, instead of doing Control V or Command V, if you do Command Shift V or Control Shift V, the Shift modifier removes the formatting as you paste. So our Wikipedia example would look something more like this. So let's say I copy and then I say add new, let's call it a news item this time. But what happens if instead of pressing Control V or Command V, what if right here I press add a shift to that? So instead of Command V, I press Command Shift V. You'll notice that all of the formatting is gone. It just faithfully pastes the text. Now, I think in my case, I would say half of the time, this is what I want. And when it's that half of the time, I'm very happy to be able to do this. And then the other times, if I actually want, so for example, a hyperlink, sometimes you actually want the hyperlink to remain clickable, then you just do Command V or Command Shift V. Sorry, Command V or Control V. So let's give this a whirl. I'm going to paste here. I did Command V in this case, or Control V, and therefore it's kept all of the formatting and my hyperlink. Whereas beneath here, this actually I could just demonstrate it right here. Same link in that I copied, but with Shift. That's how I find that really useful. That's not really a Plone thing. That's just how our operating systems are designed now. But because you might find yourself doing content editing, this is a really useful thing to know about. All right, so next we are going to move on. I think there was one other tip. Oh, no, that's the same tip. So we can move on. All right. So earlier on in the presentation, we spoke about this idea of linking to a file. Let's see how you might go about doing that. And again, I suspect those of you who have done this for a while will probably be familiar with this, but Plone has a nice way of doing this. So let's look at how that's done. And by the way, there are a lot of newer content management systems that don't get this right at all. So let us say I export this article as a PDF, and I want to then upload that PDF to my Plone site. So I'm doing that now. I'm actually going to download it as a PDF. You should be seeing something on your screen of me in the process of doing that. Give me 20 seconds. I know what's going on. There are better ways to do PDFs. All right, I'll just do it as a screenshot. It's going to be faster right now. So let's say you've taken a screenshot and you want to then share that screenshot in your Plone site. See screenshot of the article. Good. Plone allows you to upload the screenshot while you're right there in context. So the screenshot that I just took, I can locate it. That's going to be on my desktop. Here's a screenshot that we just took. I'm going to open it and click upload. Now, when I click insert now, I've created a link to the screenshot of the article. Oh, there, I forgot to give it a title. So we'll just call it something about trees. Something about trees. All right, so there we go. So the picture that I just uploaded, I was able to upload it in context while I was editing it, and then link to it. And just a quick review, the link, creating the link is just a matter of highlighting text, or you could type the text ahead of time and then highlight it. And that's it. You're able to link. I find that that's a task that is fairly common, and I've seen people actually upload the file first, then try to link to it by searching for it, which works. But this is a great way to do it. The only other thing I'd point out if you're doing this is sometimes when you're uploading the file, you don't want it to be in the same folder. So you notice the screenshot that I uploaded, all of them are at the root of the site. Again, you can solve that problem by using folders. So in this case, the way that we'd solve that problem is to add a new folder. It doesn't even have to be a new folder, but we just need a folder. And we'll call this, I like to have a special folder just for my images. And I will exclude it from navigation. And I could even keep it private because the links would still work. But I'm going to publish it. Or some people have a folder called assets or something like that. So now, if I am editing this article and I'm adding another image, I can actually add that image into the images folder. Here's another link to a file. So I'm going to use the same screenshot, but this time I'm going to make sure it ends up in my images folder. So see if we can find that images folder. Oh, I think I'm going to have to get rid of that first. Then see if we can search for images. Found the images folder. A screenshot is ready to go. But now instead of it going to the root of the site, it's going to end up in the images folder. Screenshot. It's good to add a title. That's good for accessibility so that people who are using special browsers or they're blind or something will have an idea of what the item is. So the contrast here, the first time I did upload it, uploaded in the same folder by default. But the second time I did the upload, it uploaded to the images folder. And you can see that in the URL up here. Okay. All right. Great. All right, so let's move on. Just need to make sure you're seeing the screen. Okay. How many people have had to do bulk uploading of files or images? Just trying to get an idea.
I don't get the question.
Have you had to do bulk uploading?
You mean to a Plone site?
Yeah, so you might have had a bunch of images that you wanted to upload or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I've done a few, yeah.
Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Having a fight with my virtual background, so I'm turning it off. So can you tell us just how you've gone about doing that, Matthias? Just since you're familiar with it, I might as well allow you to explain it.
Well, I was using a much older version of Plone, so it wasn't any different from, say, uploading other files. So I'm not sure I remember, because Plone 5, I'm relatively new to Plone 5.
Okay, all right. Okay, no problem. So you prefer me to just go through it then?
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. I can.
Okay, sure, no problem. All right, that's fine. So let's do that. So let's head back to our demo site. And let's say we have a bunch of images that we want to upload. So I have a couple images that I think are fine to upload. So let's do that. If you're doing any bulk operation, you're probably going to be doing it from the contents view. So that would be the key takeaway here. If you're changing several files and you want to rename them, if you want to change their state from workflow from private to public, the contents view is where you can do that type of heavy lifting. The other thing you can do with the contents view is you can upload a bunch of files. So
you can drag and drop.
Exactly, you can drag and drop. So I am going to go to my desktop where I have a couple of files. Nothing incriminating. And I am going to select them and just drag them over. And there you go. Then when you click upload, you see a nice progress bar as the items upload. So this is great if you need to upload a lot of images or a lot of files. For example, if you're managing a website with race results and they're stored as PDFs, you may want to do that. So now my images folder has all of these different images that I just uploaded. Okay. All right. So that's something that I find really useful in Plone, the ability to do bulk uploading and just bulk editing in general to change things. All right. Cutting and pasting, you actually saw me do a little bit of that already. It's a huge feature. And the truth is, I haven't seen it in a lot of other content management systems. Plone is 20 years old. There are new content management systems on the market, and a lot of them don't have this capability. And it really becomes useful if you want to move folders around and things like that. So you can cut and paste, but you can also copy and paste depending on what you need to do. So let's say that I want all of this content to go into the demo folder, all of this top level content here that is currently showing up in my navigation bar. I can actually manage all of that from the contents view. So I'll go up to the upper level in the site to home. Right. And all of these things, my feeling is that they're cluttering the root of my site. And I really want them to be in the demo folder. So I'm going to cut and paste. Actually, not cut. Yes, cut is what I want to do because I want to move them. And then I'm going to go to the demo folder. And I'm going to then use the paste option. So we're going to paste now. And all of the stuff that was in the root of the site is now in the demo folder. All the things I wanted to move. By the way, this article about trees, you will recall that in this article, we had links to files. And if you're paying attention, you might say, oh, these links are going to be broken now. But if we click the link you'll see that it has updated. So it knows, it's smart enough to know that because we cut and paste and move things around, that the links should also be updated. And that, I mean, that's part of what Plone calls link integrity. And it's a huge feature, especially if you have 500 files to deal with and you want to rearrange the site. The other thing that I've seen in other content management systems as well is if I once had a path that no longer exists, like something about trees, it's smart enough to know that it was moved and it will redirect to the new location. So even though I put something about trees, it did what is called a 300 redirect, and it moved me to the demo folder where I had now moved the things. So that gives you a little bit of confidence when you're moving things around in Plone, that you have one less step to do. You don't have to worry about, you know, the possibility that you're going to have to now update all the links, because it will do all of that for you. So I find that really useful. Okay, so that's cut and paste. And now we move to the display menu. The display menu is actually, I mentioned it earlier in the workshop. It's what you use to change the way that an item is displayed. Most commonly, people use the display menu to change how things are displayed in a folder. Okay, and I'll show you how that works. And then right after that, we're going to look at setting the default item of a folder. So whereas this is used largely on folders, it's not the only place you can use it. So if you're watching with me now, you'll see that I am going to the demo folder. Demo is a folder. And the demo folder currently displays things in this manner. What manner is this, by the way? If you go to the display menu, you see the display type ticked, and it is now it's displaying using what is called summary view. Okay, what does this mean? It means that the listing of the folder, it shows a summary of the description for items, the title of an item, and ability to read more. For news items, which can have images, it will show you a thumbnail of the image in the news item, the description, and the title. So it will vary depending on what is being summarized. And this is really a summary of the contents of the demo folder. But maybe you don't want a summary view. Maybe you want an event listing. And if you change it to event listing, what will happen is it will only find the events, and then it will show them here. Now, if the event has gone already, then it won't show at all. You can go to past events if you want to see that event. Okay, so this is another view. Let's look at some other views. There's the album view. What the album view does is it finds images in that folder and then presents them as an album. The styling is not very pretty. If you want to do a pretty album, you have to do some theming. So I'll give you a peek at a site that we did. where we have a prettier album. It's using the same mechanism, but we did some custom theming and stuff so that it will look a little prettier. So this is a Plone site, and within it, there is a photo album. I'm trying to remember where the photo gallery is. It's in the newsroom. And it's using all the functionality of the photo gallery, but it's styled totally differently. Same thing. This is just a folder with an album view, and we change the style a bit. Oh, and we added this capability so that you can actually go through them. In terms of, I guess we can talk a little bit afterwards about what it takes to get something themed to this level, starting with something like this. Let's change the display again. There is a tabular view, which basically takes all the items in your folder and displays it in a table. And then finally, there's another concept that is mentioned in this slide, which is setting an item as the default page. And to do that, from the contents view, you can just specify what item within your folder will be shown by default. So if we go back to the demo here, I'm in contents view for the demo. Let's say that I want to always show, typically you'd want to show a page. So I'll use this page, and I'm going to say set as default page. So that actually overrides the display menu. So now my default item is item a page rather than one of these. Let's view it and see what happens. So if you go to /demo now, what you will see is the contents of a page. This is really useful because you may have a section called About Us, and you want that when people go to the About Us of that folder, there is a write-up about us. You don't really want them to go to the About Us folder and see a listing of content. So that's where that becomes really useful. There's a question here, and I don't know how long ago it was asked because I didn't look at the chat for a little while. How do you add an image to the toolbar? So I assume that we're talking about this toolbar here on the left that I'm scrolling up and down on. Is that what we're talking about, Brenda? Great. So these images are actually, I have to get back to you on that. This is Plone 6, so it might be a little bit different. But I will tell you how this works. Firstly, the toolbar its purpose in life is really for navigation, not the type of navigation that normal users would experience. This is for people who are logged in. There are ways to add items to the toolbar, but I feel like Plone 5.2 may not have this, but I'll show you in the site setup. There's something called actions. And this may not answer your question 100%. You can add an item. I don't think you can add an associated image. So just for example, you may recognize some of these things as user actions. Those show up here. Okay. Portal tabs are actually the nav here. Then you have object buttons, cut, copy, paste, delete, rename, URL management, and so on. Those are associated with individual content. So when you're at individual content, it has these options. Object actions. These also show up as you're browsing content. So contents, history, sharing, rules, syndication, iCal import. Some of them are hidden, for example, syndication. But this object actions is probably the first place I would go to do this. You also have something called document actions, which allows you to do something similar. So I'm going to add an object action. I'm going to do something silly. I'm going to add an object action called visit Plone.com. So again, this is not the complete solution to getting the image there, but it will give you a new menu item. So I just created that action. I don't know if I may have done something bad by putting a space. No, I added it to document actions. I actually want it to be object actions. So let's
Hi, this is Brenda. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you, Brenda.
Okay, maybe I wasn't making myself clear. So I'm talking about the main page on the toolbar up above where people select whatever action they want to do. Can you add an image as a background to those? Is that something that we would do in theming?
Okay. So when you say toolbar, you're talking about this here?
I'm not talking about our toolbar as users. I'm talking about
navigation bar.
Navigation. Yes, I'm sorry. I was not clear about that.
Right. Because clearly I was going the wrong direction there.
Yeah.
All right. The short answer is yes, you can. It's involved.
Okay, well, see, we just launched our site and it's all basic and they did create a theme for us, but I can't figure out how to apply the theme in a way that I can manipulate what the content is.
Yeah. So I'm going to put that in a sidebar. Just write it on my clipboard.
Yeah, and this might be more in depth than what you're showing today, but I just wanted to see if there was an easy way.
So I think the problem is the easy way, right?
Right.
It's very doable, right? I don't want to say it's horribly complex, but it assumes more knowledge than you might need for some other systems. So you definitely have to know your CSS, your HTML. That's probably non-negotiable. But then on the top of that, you have to become familiar with Plone's theming system, which is something called Diazo. I'll just show you really quickly. This is high level overview. This is not in depth at all, Brenda. But what we have here is the ability to create a new theme. Okay.
So I have that in my new system that they set up. So the option to add this theme to my site, but when I do hit activate and then go back home, it's not in there. So I'm not sure where to activate it or why it's not showing on the main page.
Right.
So I don't know if that's just beyond my abilities and I have to have Plone do that, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. So if you take a little peek here, this is actually how a theme works in Plone, right? Plone's. So what you may have been given in your theming control panel is maybe a theme that somebody created for you already. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's correct. They created one for us. Yes.
Right. Probably uploaded it as a zip file or something, and then it unpacked it, and then you had your theme.
Yes.
Now, if you want to, depending on how they install the theme, you may or may not have the ability to modify it. So,
okay.
So if it was a theme that you created by copying it, or if it was created by uploading, you'll see a button that says modify theme. If you don't see that button, you'll only see a button called inspect theme. Here's the difference. Inspect theme means that it's sitting down on the file system. It's not part of your Plone data. It's actually being read from the file system, and you don't have powers to modify it. If it says modify theme, then you do have powers to modify it. So that's the first question you need to ask. Do you have?
I do have the modify theme. I'm looking at my site right now.
Great. When you make a modification, the suggested approach is you click update. At minimum, you click update. What happens there is any changes that you make are reread by the site.
Okay.
Now, sometimes when you've done your changes, the old version is cached. So you may have to clear the cache as well.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm going to do a quick modification. As I said, there's a lot that you can do, and I'm mindful of the time. So I'm kind of putting it at a sidebar, but I think I can show you in 2 minutes at least something. So the biggest win in terms of making changes is probably to change the theme file itself, and then make modifications in other places after that. So if we preview this, actually nothing is previewing, so we'll leave that out. What we have here is we have the structure of your site, okay? We have the toolbar, we have your content header, your main navigation, okay? You're probably interested in your main navigation, right?
Yes.
Right. And there's something called main navigation wrapper. I'm going to add something here. And I wasn't prepared for this, so if this doesn't work, don't kill me.
It's okay. I just wanted to see if there was a little instruction on it, but I know it's probably totally off of everyone else's.
Well, there's a couple other people said they're interested in it, so it's a little out of scope, but I understand. So I'm going through this part at least. So I've just added the word hello, right? What should happen when I go back to the control panel and I've saved the theme and everything? I'm going to click update. And what I don't remember, which is why I said don't kill me if this doesn't work, is I don't remember if the rules remove the contents of the wrapper, theme wrapper. No, they don't. So there you go. So on every page now, we have inserted a little extra bit of code, just the word hello. And this will be on literally every page now because it's integrated into the theme.
I see. Okay.
And this actually gives you a clue into the way that Plone does theming. What
Okay.
Plone actually does is it starts with a plain HTML file. And then in this is like the people who wrote it are going to be mad at me for describing it like this. They won't be mad at me, but I call it injection. So what you have is a theme, and then you inject the Plone content into parts of a file. So like for this site here, I'm sorry, a car driving by sharing their music. Right. So for this site, what we did actually was we started with a totally different theme. We designed it, and then we injected Plone content strategically where we needed to inject it. So it's a very different way of looking at theming. You start to think of it as, oh, this is my HTML file. Let me replace the menu with my menu. Let me let me change it to dynamically have news here. And the secret to Plone theming, and this is the last thing I'll share for now, it's all in something called the rules file. So what's really happening when you're doing theming in Plone is you're taking anything, a really nice HTML page, and then let's do something sneaky. Right, so you're taking a really nice HTML page, and then there are a list of rules which will say replace this here, add this before here, drop these things. And this is the part why I say, yes, you need to know your HTML and your CSS, but there's this extra thing called the Diazo rules, which control how things get displayed. So it's two bits of things. So just to show you this is the last thing inside of the rules file. Your theme, the actual HTML is right here. You notice that tag that says theme? It says theme and then href. We could actually put something else as our theme. So now we're being naughty. I'm linking to a totally different website. Good. I have to unlink very quickly after I do this because anybody looking at the site is going to be like, what's going on here? And I'm going to go back to my control panel. This is not going to work absolutely, but it will work slightly. Under advanced settings, I'm going to set it to read network. That's because my theme file is now located on somebody else's server, but my rules are still here. Hopefully we haven't lost anybody. When I click update now, what it's actually doing is it's going out to that other website and pulling it in all the HTML from that website. And then it's going to apply rules to that HTML to implement the theme. It's not going to work very well because we haven't tweaked our rules, but we will have a different look for our site if I did everything properly. Right. So it didn't quite pull in everything properly, but you can see that the site has changed quite a bit. I know there's one other thing that I should have done that I did not do for this to work. And that is, again, on the advanced settings. I need to set my absolute path. Now, this is not how you do it in real life. This is how you do it when you're demoing it to people to say, here's what's possible. And I guess once we've wrapped up all the other content, I can probably show you at least how to do this trick. And it's a good starting point to understand how Plone does theming. What did I not do?
I'm finding that working in Plone is very, it's user friendly, but it's definitely trial and error, just like how you're saying, well, let's see if this works. Let's see if that works.
Right. So I wouldn't call it trial and error. It's more, a better way to describe it is it has more moving parts. So if you're familiar with the moving parts, you can quickly correct path and get things working. So like, I know what needs to be done, and given another 10 minutes, we'll be fine. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with the moving parts, I fully agree. That's fully trial and error. Very painful.
Yeah.
So yeah. In fact, one of the talk, I'm actually doing a talk for the conference, which is targeted squarely at newbies, and it's called Asking Questions. I mean, they have a fancier title for it, but it's really sharing an approach that I've used over the years to learn Plone and other things. Hopefully it will be useful to other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me fix this back before I forget to fix it back, because someone's going to come on the site and be like, what's going on here? So I'm going to activate the old theme and delete the new one. Hold on a second. Advanced settings, save. Delete. And activate. Okay. Yeah. One of the things with Plone is they give you all the tools to shoot yourself in the foot, which means that you also have all the tools to do a lot of amazing stuff. Okay, so where are we? Right, so we're talking about the display menu, and just in summary, the value of the display menu is not just for folders. I only demoed it for folders, but for other types of content, you may want to display them in different ways. And some of this may be provided for you by your developer or integrator, and they may have installed additional display views. You can change those display views from the display menu. By default, folders come with several display views, whereas news items don't have any extra display views. If you want to, you can add new display views even to news items. Oh, and we also talked about setting an item as the default page. That's a really important thing. If you have a folder called About Us, you want to have a default page when people land on the About Us section. Okay, publication. Oh, right. We're actually supposed to be at a break. I just forgot that we were looking at some extra stuff. So let's take a break. We can take a longer break. I know people might want to do lunch or something. So give me an idea of what works. 20 minutes, half an hour. We can take that break and then come back to the next section. All right. Linda has says 30 minutes and nobody is saying no. So we'll give you a 30-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll look at restrictions. Restrictions allows you to control what people can add to different sections. So you may have a news section where you only want to allow people to add news. So we're going to look at that in the next session. Okay, everybody, off to your break. Oh, I'm not sharing the right screen, am I? Let me fix that. So right, actually the proper way to do this would be to download the entire theme, but that's not we're doing it a kind of bad way. All right, so let's get back to this. Let's make sure that we revert to the proper theme. And activate. Okay. Okay, great. Right. So we spoke about a concept called restricted shares. Restricted content. And its ability to set restrictions by section. Now, to be able to do this, you must be logged in as a manager. So I am a manager at the moment. The role that is most common is site administrator for doing things like this. So a manager includes that capability. All right, so here we are under a folder called Baobabs. We want to only allow images here. Under the Add New menu, you'll see, if you're logged in with the right permissions, you'd see something called Restrictions. If you click on Restrictions, you will have the, the ability to select your restrictions manually. And then you can just specify that I only want to be able to add images in this folder. What this does is it changes what's available in the add menu. So now when a user comes to this folder and they click add, they're only allowed to add images. So this is really useful in situations where you want to restrict what people can add to a particular section of the site. Okay. So that's basically setting restrictions. And you saw that screen already, so we can skip through that. We're now going to move into user and group management. Just a quick reminder of where we've been so far. We've looked at what is Plone. We've done a demo of logging in, password, and preferences, content management principles, folder management, and publication. And that includes restrictions. And now we're looking at user and group management. Once we're done that, we're basically done. I have a section reserved here for tips and tricks. We can use that to go through other things that you have questions about. So let's get into users and groups. Right, so let's talk about the users and group control panel. So the users and groups control panel is one of many control panels on the site setup. So to access it, you would typically go to your profile, go to site setup, and then go to users and groups. Underneath there, you will be able to add new users and add new groups. And that's what we want to explore now. The approach basically, this slide has a little bit of layout issues, so bear with me. This is these are the steps, and for some reason step 2 is on top of step 1. Let me see if I can fix that really quickly. Oops. I changed the layout this morning and clearly it didn't quite kick in everywhere. So this was one of the slides that didn't quite believe me. So I'm just tweaking that a little bit. All right. Nonetheless, these are the steps that you'll typically go through when you're working with groups. Creating users is a little more straightforward, but the principles behind groups can get a little dodgy if you're not paying attention. So these are the typical steps. You're going to want to create the group. You can set sharing on a given folder and then add that particular group to that folder. If it sounds a little confusing, that's okay because we're going to demo it. So for example, if your group is a group for diving, whoever is part of the diving group would get all the permissions and access that the diving group has in different areas. It's best to demo this. So let's say that we have people who are allowed to add 3 pictures to the website. So I'm going to go to site setup I'm going to create a user, and I'm going to create a group. In fact, I'm going to create 2 users. We'll probably only use one of them. And then we're going to have a group called trees. The group called trees will be people who can add trees to the website. So let's create a user. And you can feel free to use this user, tree person 1. So we'll call this tree 1, and we'll give them the password, password, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D. I feel like I typed that wrong. Right. This user, we'll just add them as a normal user. So now we've added our user called tree1. Tree1 is going to go into a group, and I'll add tree2 after this, but let's add a new group called trees. Okay. So the group is going to be called trees. I prefer to use common letters for the actual group ID. And people who can upload tree pictures to the folder. All right. I'm describing it, but I haven't actually made that true yet. We'll soon make that true. So we've now added a group called trees. And let's add tree1 to that group. So we're going to search for tree1. We'll just search for tree. It should show everybody who matches. So tree person 1 added to that group. It's going to be useful when we're ready to log in as tree person 1. Let us now create another user, tree person 2. So I'm going to the users tab. I'm going to add new user. And this user is tree person 2. So this is tree 2. Also, their password is password. Now notice something. When we were adding tree 1, there was no group called trees. But because we've created a group called trees, while we add a new user, we can actually add them to the group called trees. That's useful. So we're going to register now. And we now have tree 1 and tree 2. Now, what did we promise about the trees group that both of these persons are part of? We gave it a description that basically said that this was a special group for persons who could add tree pictures to the Baobab folder. So we're going to go to that folder. Okay. And that folder is under demos. And we're going to take advantage of sharing. And what this is going to allow is for the trees group. If we're searching for that trees group, we're going to give them the ability to add, edit, review, give them the full ability, full capabilities. And what that means is anybody who has been added to that group can now add content to the Baobabs folder. let me log out, and you can try this too by visiting the site. I'll send you a link directly to this here, and you can try adding your own tree pictures. Where are we? Oh, let me put it in the chat here. So you can try that out. Let's make use of restrictions, or we've already restricted it to images. So now I'm going to log in as one of these tree persons. So let's log out. I think I'm showing the wrong screen. Right, this is the right screen. So let me log out. And our expectation is that when I log in now as tree person 1 with the password, I should be able to navigate to that folder and add content. If I go to the demo folder, you notice I can't add content to the demo folder. I don't have that permission. But if I go to the Boababs folder, I have the ability to add an image. And that's because I'm part of the tree group, and the tree group has gotten that sharing capability. So now I can add my picture. I should actually get a picture of a tree, shouldn't I? So let's Wikipedia. How about a tree that's actually in my yard? Right. Yeah, this tree has so many different names, even in the Caribbean, but we call them sweet socks. Right. Do I have a nice picture of the tree? I guess this will have to do. All right, so let's add that. So because I have the permissions to add in this context, I'm able to add my picture of my sweet sock tree. Great. And it gives credit, tree person 1 added it. So feel free to add other stuff. I've pasted the URL in the chat, and the passwords, usernames are tree2 and tree1, if you want to try that out. Okay. So that's just a quick overview of how these settings work. I'm going to move on. If you want to learn a little more about Plone's workflow system, managing sharing and permissions, you can find that information at the Plone website. And I'll also put a link to it in the chat. Okay. Right. So I did reserve a section to go through analytics. However, this is a bit out of the scope. So at this point, we can move straight into tips and tricks and anything else that you might want to go through. I have one tip that I want to show you, and then if you have questions, this is a good time to go through tips, tricks, and questions. So one thing that I find people need to do a lot of the time is to embed media and things like that. So let's say you have a news item and you have something on YouTube that you want to show. Let's see, YouTube, Plone. Let's see what we get. We'll probably get the Plone music video. No, this was a classic screencast. This was a long time ago, an introduction to Plone. Be interesting to see how well it has aged. So let's say in this news item here, and I'm going to need to log back in as somebody else, not 3-person, because I can't edit. You want to embed a YouTube video. There's a feature in the Tiny MCE editor that allows you to do external embeds. All right.
Hello, I'm going to be introducing Plone, P-L-O-N-E.
Let's see if we can find it.
Plone itself is an odd surname, certainly in some languages, but it also happens to be the name of an electronic music producer from the UK. And the Plone that I'm going to be talking about...
All right, so let's see if we can embed this video. So we're going to go to share, and there's an embed option when you click share. So I'm going to choose embed. Let's copy that. And then head to our news item, which we're going to edit. And most people, I guess, intuitively, your first thought is, oh, I'll just paste it there and it will embed. And that will not work. So if you do something like this and go paste, it's just going to show the code. And then you say, oh, well, the smarter thing to do would be to go to the source code. Since it's code, let's paste that. And then say, okay. And that looks like it will work. So let's click save. And that actually works. But there's another way to do this, which Tiny MCE provides inside of Plone. And it's the way that I prefer to do it. So I'm going to go into edit. Sorry, insert, and insert media. And you'll see it has an option to embed, and then it gives me whatever embed code I need for my particular thing. I can just click embed and then click OK. And that works. And I have a little preference for doing it that way, but if you prefer to go into the source code, You can do it that way as well. Sometimes the source code does not work for me. Sorry, whereas I found that this works pretty nicely. So again, that's insert media, and then you can do that. Okay, so there's another question. How do you add an RSS feed? Oh, that one is a little trickier, but I'll show you that. And it's something that we haven't looked at, Brenda. I'm going to write that down here, RSS feed. Let's just see, is there anything else we need to cover? And then we'll just go back through some of the things we made notes about. No, I think we've covered everything. So let me give you the list of what we're going to cover from the questions. There was a question that Matthias had asked about home folder as the root of your folder tree. And the answer is yes. And we looked at that a little bit as we continued through the workshop. So I don't think we need to look at that. We can also briefly look at Volto. There was a question to, can we look at Volto? The RSS feed. That's feed. So we look at that. Most of the other things we looked at already, default items in folders, the display menu. Maybe we can look at paginated content. So let's look at the RSS feed since that's the one that's on the radar now. So we're going to answer that question, Brenda, okay? Let's go. So first of all, let's find an RSS feed. Do you have an RSS feed you want to share with us, or should I just steal one from my blog? Post comments. All right, so I think this is an Atom feed. I think it should work. So let's see. I haven't done RSS feeds for a while. And there's a difference between an Atom feed and an RSS feed. But I think Plone can manage it. So let's go to the home page. And what we're going to do is I see Brenda says she tried weather, so maybe we'll try that out afterwards. If you can send me the link to the weather you tried, we could try it out. So there's something called manage portlets, and let's put it in the right column. So we already have news, we'll have an RSS feed underneath it. So there's a special portlet called an RSS feed portlet. And we will call this blog comments since that's where it came from. And we will paste this. Now this is an Atom feed. If it doesn't work, I'll just have to find a proper RSS feed. So let's try it out and see. So it looks like it may have found it. It's treating it like RSS. So let's see if it works. If I go to my home page, there we go, blog comments. So that's pretty useful. I can also go back and manage my right column because maybe I want the news to show up before the blog comments. So I can change the order. Actually, I can't change the order. Just a note here. This portlet is associated directly with the default view of the home page. That's my signal to say that we have 20 minutes left. I'll set another signal. But maybe you don't want your RSS feed to only show on the home page. Maybe you want it to be there on other pages. So let's do that with the weather. Okay, So weather.gov/RSS, which is what Brenda has shared with us. All right, so first of all, we need to locate the feed because this is not the RSS feed. This is a page about the RSS feed. So, all right, how about hurricanes and tropical cyclones? So here we go. Here are the feeds. So let's just take the first one since it's there. And this is indeed a straight RSS feed. So this should work quite well. I'm going to do this a little differently because my blog comments, if I go to another page, they're not going to be there because they're associated directly with this home page. So you notice I have news items, but I don't have my RSS feed. So this time I'm going to make sure that I'm adding it to the site and not just to a page. I'm still going to the manage portlets and right column, but I'm going to pay attention to what it says up here. You're managing the portlets of the default view. If you want to manage the portlets of the container, go here. So I'm going to do that. The container in this case is the entire website, as opposed to just one page on the site. So I'm going to go to the site root, and then I'm going to add an RSS feed, and we'll call this weather. I'm going to paste the URL. So it's important that you get the real URL, otherwise this will never work. And then we should be able to go to any page and the feed should be there. And indeed it is. So that's how you do RSS feeds. It feels like RSS feeds have fallen out of favor. Maybe a new generation of users who don't know about it are now doing development and content management, but they're still here and they're still useful. So thanks for that question, Brenda.
Yeah, it's useful for us because we live in a weird climate. So we'd like to put that on our page to have for our people who visit.
Remind me of where you're based?
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Ah, okay.
We're right in the middle of a high desert. So we're at about 5,000 feet, but we're a dry climate. So it's very interesting weather here. Lots of sunshine, but we still get all the seasons.
Okay, okay, okay. As in, how extreme, just out of curiosity.
So like in one day we could have snow, sunshine, wind. It could feel, you have to dress in layers. It's very, very interesting, but most of the time it's sunny. So, but very dry here. We have very, very limited moisture. 20% humidity here is very high for us.
Okay, impressive, impressive. I guess at least without the humidity, it doesn't get sticky.
No.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Brenda. So the only thing else was Volto, and then there was I had some talking points, but we can skip those because we only have 15 minutes left. So how many have people looked at Volto? Just out of curiosity, how many people have seen Volto? Not really. Okay. And nobody is saying yes. All right. So Volto is the future of Plone. And what they've effectively done is they've taken all the power of Plone and then they've put a modern interface on top of it. So as I'm just Googling to find a demo of Volto. So the experience, the editing experience feels more like what you expect when you're using some of these tools like Medium. I don't know if you've ever blogged with Medium or Ghost, or I'm trying to think of other things. I guess like when you're using, maybe not so much, but when you're using Gmail, you kind of expect things to load and you don't have to wait for them to reload and things like that. And so that's the experience that Volto brings. I don't remember the password. I think it should be listed somewhere here. Admin. Good. So this is Plone, but what they've done is they're treating Plone as a black box, and Plone provides what is called an application programming interface, or API, and then Volto speaks to Plone and gets all this information from Plone. So when you log into Volto, it's an interface that could be running on top of anything else, but it's running on top of Plone, and it was built to run on top of Plone. So what's different is this principle of the editing button is always up here. You get the familiar toolbar, and you can go to your preferences as you'd expect, but you notice it doesn't load a new page. It just provides you with settings for your preferences. And then you can save them. You can view folder contents just like in Plone, because Volto really is a layer on top of Plone. But it's a nice experience. So let's close that. If you're editing a page, the editing experience feels more like, I'd love to say Medium and assume that everybody knows what Medium is, but it's a more modern editing experience. So one of the things that's common to this type of experience is that things are presented in blocks. If I press enter, a new block is created, and the plus sign allows me to add things. So for example, adding a video in this case is a matter of getting the URL for the video. I don't have to go searching for the embed code. It will figure that out. And then I just click and my video is added. The video is treated as what is called a block. So I can change the layout so that I might want the video to be floated to the right. That's a lot easier to do with Volto. And Volto pretty much is going to be the editing experience when Plone 6 is released. So in a sense, this is just giving you something to look forward to in terms of Plone. Right, so we have about 10 minutes left. Is there anything you'd want to go through in those 10 minutes? I mean, there are other things that we can look at with Volto. Okay. Okay, well, in that case, I'll just wrap up. I will say that, well, thank you for participating. I trust that what we've gone through here has been valuable and gives you a little more grasp of managing Plone. I've been using Plone for a while, and I really enjoy showing people how to use it. at the same time, I also use other systems nowadays, just because you kind of have to choose the right tool for the right job. I will say I do think Volto will be very useful, and already you can see where you can get a lot of stuff out of Volto. And thank you again for coming to this presentation. And I will be presenting in the full conference on asking questions and how that can help you for your future self. That's roughly the title of the presentation. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to be signing off. To stop my screen share, stop my video, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope the conference goes really well for you guys. Okay, bye.